Hello guys, welcome back to your channel once again. It's been quite a while. So today, as part of our networking fundamental series, we'll be looking at ports and protocols, which follows up on the IP addresses and subnetting concept you have talked about in previous videos. So without wasting much time, let's dive right in. So before now, we know a device is basically identified on a network by its IP address at the network layer. But we also know from typical use of our devices that at every point in time, we have so many applications and services running simultaneously on our devices. So the question here is, with the numerous applications and services running, how does the operating system really differentiate which data packet belongs to which stream? How does it know that this is your browsing data, this is your YouTube stream, this is your WhatsApp text and all this? And that is a question ports and protocols answer. Ports and protocols are what makes it possible for applications and services on our devices to have a distinguished channel of communication on the network. So a port in networking is basically a 16-bit number that is assigned to applications and services on the network for the purposes of data communication. So ports here are not the physical USB Type-C or the HDMI ports we know, but they basically serve the same purpose. Just as we can't plug a USB device into an HDMI port, in the same way HTTP traffic cannot go through a DNS port. So they basically serve as communication endpoints and they direct data to the correct applications and services on the network. Now, to make this more relatable, let's top it off with a classic analogy of an IP address being the house number of an apartment building you are in, and then the port number being the actual room number of the room you are in. So say we are to send data or a letter or a package to you, we need the house number of the apartment building and the actual room number where you are, so the data or the package can get to you. And so in this case, the IP address identifies your device on the network, and then it is by the help of these port numbers that data gets to the correct applications and services running. So that is how your device is able to identify a YouTube stream from a web traffic. Now, a port number being a 16-bit number means there are a total of 65,535 of them. And so port numbers range from 0 all the way to port 65,535. These port numbers are assigned by the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. So port numbers are grouped into three ranges. From port 0 to port 1023 are called the well-known ports, which we will look at some examples in a minute. And then from port 1024 to port 49,141 are called registered ports, and these ports are ports that have been registered by software organizations and other big companies by INA. An example of such ports is the port 1521, which is registered by Oracle Database Services, and then port 3389, which is registered by Microsoft for Remote Desktop Protocol. And then lastly, there's port 49,152 all the way to port 65,535, and these ports are known as ephemeral, temporal, or dynamic ports. These are the ports your computer's operating system assigns to applications and services it is temporarily running. So say we have a browser open a website. The socket will typically have a source IP and a destination IP header, and also a source port and a destination port header. So assuming the website we are browsing is being hosted on this IP address, say 200.50.40.26, that is going to be the destination IP, and then the source IP would obviously be the IP address of our device. And the destination port in this case would be port 443, which is mostly configured for HTTPS communications. And then the source port will now be an ephemeral port which the operating system has assigned to that specific application or service we are running at the time. So as we are accessing the contents of the website through port 443, the server is also responding to us through the ephemeral ports that our operating system has assigned to that specific process. And so that's how the ephemeral ports work. Now, a protocol, on the other hand, is basically a set of rules that predefine how data should be formatted and transmitted in a communication process. Now, we could think of protocols as basically the languages of computer networking. So just as we have languages as humans, take English for instance, which makes it possible for you to watch and understand this content because we probably have the same understanding of most words I use in this video. Same way, networking protocols also establish a set of rules that makes it possible for two computers from different manufacturers to have a fruitful communication process on a network. So the protocols define stuff like how to start a connection, how to end a connection, what happens if data packets get lost, and what the data should actually look like. So without protocols, it is basically impossible for two devices to communicate even if they were physically connected. Now, it is worth knowing that protocols exist at each layer of the TCP/IP stack, right from the physical layer to the application layer. Protocols are used in almost every layer of the communication process. Now, in the networking world, you probably hear that port 443 is for HTTPS, port 80 is for HTTP, port 53 is for DNS, amongst others. Now, this is mostly right, but also a bit nuanced. The relationship between the port numbers and the protocols does not necessarily mean that the port number is being owned by that protocol. So, it's not as if port 443 is strictly for HTTPS services. It is just by convention that the web server is mostly configured to run on port 443. So the point is, if you host your local web server, you could configure HTTPS to run on any other port number apart from 443. But obviously, client who would be accessing that web server would need that new port number to be able to establish a useful communication session between their device and your server. So in network security, as a system admin, it is mostly advisable to close unused ports, and this is very important because the more ports you have open increases your attack surface. And so if you have insecure ports that are open and an attacker is able to get into your network through that port, it could cause a whole lot of harm. So, IP addresses, as we've discovered previously, gets data to your device, and then with the help of ports, the data actually gets to the right application or service on your device. And the protocols basically define the communication process between the two devices. Thanks very much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Like this video if it was helpful to you, and also consider sharing and then leaving your comment in the comment section below.